It's emerging. Do you hear it?
T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, lift
Do you
off.
feel it?
Houston now controlling and liftoff of Discovery.
Technology. The trustworthy journalism required to make technology a greater force for good is here. It's always been, and it has barely begun.
Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this special preview session for our flagship event, EmTech MIT. I'm Niall Firth. I'm MIT Technology Review's executive editor based here in London. And with me today on the call is my colleague James O'Donnell, our AI and hardware reporter based in Boston. Hi James, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
So what is EmTech MIT, you might be asking? If you don't know, it's for about more than 20 years. We've been running it as our main event, place for discussions on emerging trends and technologies, really before they hit the zeitgeist. So we have experts from all different places, businesses, talking about the issues, breakthroughs, and applications for technology in their business. The next one's going to be held at the MIT Media Lab on September 30th and October the 1st, 2 consecutive days. And the agenda is going to be focused on two of the biggest topics in tech right now. That's AI, obviously, surprise, and climate tech. James and I are going to be covering a lot of the AI sessions over those 2 days. So we thought it'd be fun to give you a little teaser of some of the biggest topics, themes, tell you about a couple of the speakers we've got lined up, just to give you a feel for what it's going to be like on the days. So we're calling this session the front lines of change, because what it really means is we're going to be introducing you to some industry leaders who are already working through some of the gnarliest issues, problems, challenges that probably many of you who will be attending will be grappling with in the coming months and years. You get a chance to pick up some tips, tactics, maybe learn some new approaches for your own business or your life. So before we start today's chat, remember, if you've got any questions, throw them in the chat window, and I'll try to get to as many as I can during the call. Right, let's get into it. James, hello. What are you thinking about ahead of the event? What's on your mind, and what are you excited about coming up?
Yeah, sure thing. I think top of mind for me as we head into EmTech and this year in general is definitely trust as we think about AI. It's obviously an election year. We've already seen a couple cases where the trustworthiness of AI has really been brought into question and sort of entered the political sphere. So you had images of Taylor Swift fans embracing and supporting Donald Trump, which Donald Trump embraced on X or other platforms, and it turned out that many, if not all of those images were generated by AI. You also had Donald Trump making accusations about crowd size, images of crowd size being AI generated for Kamala Harris. So even if you put the election examples aside, you also have the issue of AI overviews, which Google has launched this year and has sort of totally transformed how we get information through Google search. AI is helping to sort of filter out information, and sometimes it does a good job of that and it delivers answers very efficiently. And then, as you've probably seen other times, it delivers bad information, misinformation, things like that. So the trustworthiness of AI, I think, is a really top theme for us this year, and I'm excited that we're going to be diving into that at EmTech. One speaker I'm particularly excited about, her name is Yasmin Green. She heads up Jigsaw, which is a unit within Google that's sort of, in a way, tasked to solve this problem. So Jigsaw does a lot of work trying to make the internet a more safe place, a more trustworthy place. So she's going to be discussing some interesting new research with us and some of her work in general. So she's kind of the perfect guest for us to sort of, debrief how AI is affecting our trust in our political system, in the web, things like that. So really excited to have her guide us through that.
That's cool. That's very cool. And I know all the events you've got. I know something you cover a lot is quantum computing. You're keeping an eye on what's happening in that space. And we've got these out there at the event that you're going to be chatting to. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, quantum is in an interesting space right now. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard that quantum computing is promising to do really great things for us. And what it's promising to do is basically compute things faster than ever before. So that could be really helpful with things like drug discovery, but also really helpful with things like training AI models more efficiently. Obviously, it's a big question right now of how much computing time, but also energy and emissions are being spent for computing power related to AI models. So quantum computing is promising to change a lot of that. The problem is that it's also still sort of in its infancy. So people have been working on it for decades. And when I talk to experts in the quantum computing realm, they say, that's just sort of how the process is going to be. We'll get there eventually. They say it's kind of inevitable that we'll start to shift towards that way of computing, but it's kind of a slog to get there. Really expensive to research, and a lot of companies are sort of, trying to do this in incremental stages. They're building really small quantum computers, which is good to demonstrate the technology, but it's actually not very useful right now. They're kind of too small to do anything useful, certainly not something as complicated as discovering a new drug or antibiotic or things like that, which requires, millions of computations. So one company I'm excited to chat with at EmTech, they're called PsiQuantum. They're taking a bit of a different approach. So instead of trying to build incrementally, incremental small computers, they actually kind of have this moonshot vision that, we're not going to really build one until we can build it large enough that it can be useful. So they're testing out different components and chips to sort of get there. And they are actually working in the state of Illinois to build sort of the largest quantum supercomputer campus right now. They have their goal set of building that sometime in the next 10 years. They're also working in Australia, I believe, with a lot of quantum computing experiments there. So that'll be an interesting lesson in sort of what it's like to toil away at a problem that's many years away from coming to fruition, but kind of requires that incremental step to get there. So they will be there, and really excited to chat with them.
Very cool. I just want to say I've heard that there's some problems with my connection on the feed, so really sorry about that if I'm looking kind of weird and glitchy. We're working on it to see what happens with that. And tell us, give us one more that you're looking at the event, apart from computing.
Sure. So it's not strictly AI related, but in a way it is, I suppose. So we're going to be talking to a company called Synchron, which, if you haven't heard of them, they are sort of a competitor to Neuralink. So they make brain interfaces for people with all sorts of mobility issues or disabilities. So that could be, something like Parkinson's, all the way up to paralysis, things like that. So they help people sort of interact with their environment or with screens, with computers, if they are not physically able to. And we're going to be chatting with them. It's a really interesting field. It's obviously also kind of in its infancy and very heavily regulated. It takes a lot to get these sort of devices even to the trial stage. So from my understanding, Synchron right now has about 6 patients with devices. That compares to Neuralink. I think either has 1 or 2. I have to check on that. But in its very early stages of getting FDA approval to actually get these devices implanted in patients. One thing that's sort of unique about Synchron is it requires, supposedly a less invasive procedure than Neuralink. So Neuralink is a full-on implant, whereas Synchron actually goes into a vein near the brain, from my understanding. And it can be implanted a little bit less invasively with some of the same characteristics. So I'm excited to talk to their CTO, Ricky Banerjee, about what it's like to sort of develop another type of moonshot technology that's set to have some real impact for people. So that's one side of the conversation. But something else I'm excited to chat with her about is what it's like to share a space with Elon Musk, who is obviously, very dominant in the media cycle right now. And so it'll be interesting to hear her thoughts on sort of the ups and downs of having someone like that bring so much attention to the field, to this technology that people are still sort of getting to know, but also what it's like to have him as a major competitor. So I think that'll be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I wonder, I bet many people in the public can't name any other rocket companies apart from SpaceX. If you're competing in the space as someone with that massive social presence, that huge PR presence, like how do you get anything done? Okay, let me tell you about what I'm excited about. So I've still got a few under wraps for now, but I can tell you about a few that I'm really looking forward to. One of the topics, marketing, generative AI and marketing. Is this something that is going on right now, but not quite sure in what forms? And I'm speaking to Rebecca Sykes, who's from the Brand Tech Group, and they have lots of sub-brands beneath them. And they've got various different ways they're using generative AI. People, creators are using to sort of create their own ad campaigns. It comes up with copy, images, the whole thing all in one go, and it propagates out. And she's probably going to talk about like the dangers and there's a brand to like get your name out there. One of the dangers being if you don't really know who you are and what you stand for, and you're suddenly propagating a generative AI campaign based on that, it's going to come out really woolly. There was one thing I was like, and that is the idea of having generative AI models being the audience, a new audience for your brand. So the idea being that you are focusing your AI models think about your brand. It sounds like weird. It sounds like something doesn't really make sense intuitively, but actually I think so much now as proxies for other things. If you're using Gemini via search, it's based on the large language model. Llama from Meta via social. So the idea is like get your brand model and see if it spits back the things that you think of are important for your brand. Like, if you make an energy drink and you kind of really want the brand to be associated with like sporty, feed it into various language models, and that's not what comes back. They come up with techniques to try and then tweak it by maybe doing a series of YouTube videos that can then feed into the model to try and get your brand ranking for that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a new version of so I'm really looking forward to chatting to her about that. Then what else have I got? I've also got speaking to someone from FedEx. We'll be talking about supply chain, that kind of thing, how they're sort of doing the last mile problem with autonomous robots. In your reporting, looking at how generative AI is sort of supercharging how we train robots to do things. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're in a really interesting time for robotics. I think for a long time people felt like, we've been seeing videos of crazy robots for years, but they haven't really, made an impact, especially in the home. Most of us probably, if we have a Roomba for a long time, that's probably been the most complicated robot that we interact with on a daily basis. That is, unless you live in one of the cities with robo-taxis, which have obviously gotten a lot more common this year. San Francisco, cities in Texas, there's some other pilot cities. But for the most part, robots were kind of slow to develop. And then AI started to really change, especially in the last year or so, how roboticists were able to train robots. So instead of coding them to do one specific task in a laboratory, move this tennis ball over here or pick this box up and put it on this pallet, instead of having to sort of manually code all of those tasks, people were getting really good at just feeding in data of example tasks and having the robot sort of learn how to do those tasks themselves. So if you were to, it's called, one method of doing that is called teleoperation, where you basically have a human manipulate the robot to, let's say, wash something off of a dish using a sponge. You maybe coach the robot how to wash 80 dishes. And if you coach the robot how to wash 80 dishes, that might be all it takes for them to be able to wash any dish that looks vaguely similar to the ones that you taught them on. So just like large language models that can be fed, a corpus of text and then be trained how to sort of generate sentences and predict the next word in a given sentence, you can pretty much do the same for robots, it turns out, where you can train them with existing data. And so that over the last year or so has made some really explosive impacts in robotics. Not so much in home robotics still. I mean, that's a field that's sort of coming up, but we're still a ways away from having robots sort of do menial housework for us. But in terms of commercial robots, people may have seen lots of videos from Figure AI and Elon Musk's Optimus robots and various different humanoid companies that are getting many billions of dollars of investment right now. And a lot of that investment in humanoids is happening because AI is making it easier for us to train these robots. So we're putting together some really great sessions for EmTech to sort of walk people through how those changes are probably going to happen, what jobs are going to be affected first, what sort of industries are going to be affected first. But I can safely say that this year is things are changing by the month. It's hard for me to even keep up with all the robot news that's coming out.
Yeah, it's good. Keeps you busy. I've got a question from Shantanu about whether there'll be an issue with intellectual property rights with AI and tech advancement. And actually, that is something that we write about a lot, something we cover a lot. One of the people I'm going to be speaking to, really excited about, is a company called Story Protocol, and they are like absolutely red hot right now. That if anyone who's on the call will have seen over the last week, they just raised absolute ton more money in a Series B round, valuing them at something north of $2 billion now. But they're basically a blockchain company for to protect the IP of creators. So, and I put my hands up here as a massive disclaimer, having sort of knocking around tech reporting for about 20 years. I've been through a lot of blockchain stuff, and I've definitely edged towards the skeptical side of things, waiting for the blockchain to become the thing that's going to replace something, and it never seems to happen. But something's been happening in the last couple of years called smart contracts, and we've covered that a little bit at MIT Technology Review. And these are basically contracts that are embedded in the blockchain that execute when certain conditions are met. And I think that's when it is starting to get a lot more interesting. So basically, Story Protocol's got this system where they embed smart contracts in, and you put your IP in there, whether it's your images, if you're an artist, or if you're a publisher, or your work, and you set it up with a smart contract that says people can use it for these different purposes if they pay this amount of money. So people can license it to remix it, republish it, or for generative AI models to train on it. They can then pay directly using the smart contract without any lawyers or lawsuits or middlemen involved. And a kind of thing is meant to happen all seamlessly. And it's part of this. It's part of this bigger topic that we've written about a lot, about the fight back between creators and the big tech companies who are kind of using these models to suck up all of this artistic work. And I think it's kind of an interesting solution to the problem. It comes at it from a different way that we've done it in the past. We've covered it a lot from the artist's side, a thing called glaze, where you can put it on your work to stop people scraping it, or nightshade, our colleague Melissa has covered, which is where you poison your work so it completely messes up any model that tries to train on it. This is a different version of that. It's all right, I think they're going to take it anyway, so how can I monetize that? So I'm kind of interested in speaking to their co-founder, going to dig into what that means.
Yeah, can I add one more just little bit to that? It's interesting you bring that up, because I had an interview yesterday with a VP from Amazon, and we were talking a lot about the issue of explainability. How much can you get a model to actually tell you what it's doing under the hood? And that is actually really important. We were talking about with intellectual property stuff, because if you could imagine, let's say, an AI music generator, which we've covered before, right now, all of those generators are being sued because they're basically producing work that sounds a heck of a lot like the Beach Boys or Beyonce or whatever, take your pick of artist. And the artists are saying that's sort of copyright infringement if you're able to generate this thing using AI that sounds exactly like my style. And so what I was talking with this engineer about yesterday was, is it possible, in the future to have models where the model can actually tell you, hey, this song is actually 5% Beyonce and 10% the Beach Boys, and that would probably be a terrible song, but it could actually cite, what artists it's getting for its inspiration, and then that could lay the groundwork for some sort of compensation system, let's say, where if you know that your work was used in the generation of some sort of output, whether it's a song or a poem or a book, we're getting to a point where you can actually explain that, and there might be, the technologically possible to have some sort of compensation system behind that. So I'm happy you're going to be exploring something related to that at EmTech.
Yeah, I think it's a really sort of cool, sort of coming from the opposite end of trying to fight basically the inevitable. Just saying, how can you make money out of it? I think I've probably got time to tell you one more talk I'm
Sure.
going to be doing. I'm going to be speaking to Slack's new CEO. And that's going to be really fascinating. That's on the end of the second day. It'll be something like to build up to. And Slack quite recently bought by Salesforce. I think she's the third CEO in like a little over a year or so. So there's a lot of change going on at Slack that I want to find out about. But also, they're really rolling out loads of generative AI stuff for all kinds of things. So like at MIT Technology Review, and probably lots of people watching are saying use Slack all day long for all of our interactions at work. And I know, like, I go on vacation, I come back, I have like this like obsessive compulsion to read every channel that I missed to see, like, what stories I missed, what chats, what banter, what are the jokes that I wasn't kept in on. And I know you're not meant to do that, but it's hard. There's so much to catch up on, and also trying to find, like, I know I spoke to James O'Donnell about something like this about a week ago, and trying to like search through it. So they've been like rolling out these generative AI add-ons, basically, things that do like summarize discussions that you've had with people, or like a more sort of turbocharged search for kind of certain topics, or can just like summarize a channel while you're away. This is the kind of the general vibe that you missed out on. But there's lots to get into there, and especially about like how you sort of roll out AI across a massive company and make it work for people, and sort of also be cognizant of people's privacy and their sort of direct messages to each other, that it's not being sucked up into the model. So I think there's lots and lots of sort of things to play with and talk about around that, about sort of workplace AI in particular.
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting time for how much appetite we have for AI systems doing work for us in terms of how much privacy we want to sacrifice. And I guess it just makes me think of back when, photo aggregators like the Photos apps started to get really good at recognizing faces and organizing your photos into, this vacation versus that one. And at first we may have been a little skeeved out by these companies having access to our photos, but if they deliver a good enough product, you start to kind of, give them a little bit more leeway. And I wonder if with something like Slack, depending on how they roll these out, if we'll have a sort of similar pattern where at first people are afraid to give Slack our messages, and then over time, if they do a good job with it, you start to sort of lose that fear. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I mean, that's kind of a summary of some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. I know, we've got other people who are also going to be at the event, and we're going to be doing a lot of very cool stories between now and then that I expect everyone to be reading out there. But just a few other highlights of stuff that's going to be there. There's an amazing session coming up that's going to have Amy Webb, the futurist, in it, who's going to be talking about the idea of like a tech super cycle and how you sort of navigate that as a business or a business leader, which is very cool. What I'm really looking forward to, definitely going to be like every seat packed in the house. Ray Kurzweil is going to be there, and he's sort of very famous tech sort of writer and futurist as well, I suppose. He talks a lot about the singularity, the idea of when humans and machines are going to be melded together. He was one of the very first to be talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence, like the very concept of which is like pretty controversial and contested. And it's something we've written a lot about on this. So I can't wait to hear what he's going to say. That's going to be total fireworks, I imagine. And then also at the event, we're going to be unveiling, for the second year running, our climate tech list of 15 companies to watch. So basically, this is sort of companies that we have picked carefully from around the world that we think have a chance of substantially cutting emissions or counteracting the effects of climate change in some way. Some really cool names on there. Some people, that people will know, some that they definitely won't know, and that's going to be unveiled live on stage. And my colleague Amy Nordrum is going to tell you more about that. Tell you, James, but also you, the audience, more about that alongside our editor-in-chief, Matt Quinlan, in a special LinkedIn Live that we're holding next month. And it's called AI, Climate, and the New Rules of Business. So she'll be talking more about AI and the climate side of things, and giving you a bit more of a teaser of what else is coming up on our agenda. So that's coming up next month, so make sure you're signed up for that. But I'm afraid that is all we've got time for in our special preview session. Thank you, James, for joining us, and thank you, everyone watching there, for coming along for the ride. If you want to know more about the event, go and visit us at emtechmit.com. That's EmTechMIT.com. And keep an eye out for your in your emails, because you're going to get a special email with a special discount offer for the event as a thank you for coming along to see me and James chat. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully see you all at EmTech MIT. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.